Rachel Thompson never wanted to return to the place where her grandmother used to work. Ravenhill Asylum, an abandoned psychiatric hospital in upstate New York, had been closed since the 1970s after a fire claimed the lives of several patients and staff. But curiosity and a strange letter left by her grandmother before she died pulled her back. "You must see Ward 9, the letter read, written in shaky handwriting. "Seal it. Don't let it out." Rachel, along with two of her college friends, Marcus, a documentary filmmaker, and Claire, a skeptic who didn't believe in anything supernatural, decided to make the trip. For them, it was an adventure. For Rachel, it was something deeper, something personal. Ravenhill stood like a skeleton of the past. Vines covered its windows, and every door groaned with memories. As they stepped through the front entrance, a wave of cold air hit them as if the building exhaled after holding its breath for decades. Rachel clutched the old map she found among her grandmother's belongings. On it, Ward 9 was circled in red, but in the official building blueprints, there was no Ward 9. They made their way through dusty hallways, broken gurneys, and peeling wallpaper. The atmosphere grew heavier the deeper they went. Claire mocked the ambiance. "Creepy, sure. Haunted. Come on." Marcus filmed everything, whispering narration into his mic. When they reached the West Wing, Rachel stopped in front of an old elevator shaft. Her map said Ward 9 was behind it, but all they saw was a wall. That's when Rachel noticed something ate on the floor, scratch marks, as if something heavy had been dragged away. They searched and found a narrow maintenance corridor behind a rusted metal cabinet, and at the end of it, a black wooden door. There was no number, no sign, just a door burned, slightly at the edges, with a small window at eye level, covered in something that looked like old blood. Claire hesitated. "That's not part of the tour." Rachel approached slowly and peeked through the window. She recoiled immediately. "There's someone inside." They all looked. A figure stood in the middle of the room, completely still, facing away from the door. It wore a patient gown. The lights inside flickered, even though there was no electricity. Suddenly, the figure turned its head without moving its body. Marcus dropped the camera. The door creaked and opened by itself. Rachel, Marcus, and Claire stood frozen as the door slowly swung open. The figure was no longer there. The room was lit by a flickering overhead light, even though the power had long been cut. Inside were old patient beds, rusted wheelchairs, and restraints hanging from the ceiling. Everything was unnaturally clean to clean for a room that hadn't been touched in decades. Marcus picked up his camera, his hands trembling. "Did we all see that?" Claire forced a laugh. "Maybe it's a prank. Hidden speakers, or..." Then they heard it. Whispers. Soft, distant, then suddenly near. All around them, Rachel felt a pressure in her chest. She clutched her grandmother's letter in her jacket pocket. Claire turned pale. "Someone's here with us." From behind one of the beds, something moved. Rachel stepped closer and saw a name carved into the wall. Eleanor T., her grandmother. Marcus found an old recording device on a table. He pressed play. A woman's voice came through, frantic, trembling. "They don't die in here. They remember. They remember everything." Rachel's breath caught. That's her voice. Suddenly, all the beds began to shake, ... and the door slammed shut behind them. They ran to the door. Locked. Rachel banged on it. "We're trapped." Marcus tried his phone. No signal. The lights flickered violently. From under the beds, black liquid began to seep thick, tar-like sludge that moved as if alive. Claire backed into a corner, whispering, "This isn't real. This isn't real." Rachel pulled out the map again, but something was different. The paper felt warm, and new lines had appeared, hallways and rooms that weren't there before, all leading into a spiral, with Ward 9 at the center. "What is this place?" Marcus whispered. Then a scream echoed through the room, not from any of them. It came from the hallway behind the wall. Claire trembled. "Did you hear that?" That sounded like David. David had been a friend of theirs. He disappeared 5 years ago after exploring an abandoned hospital near Boston. Rachel's face turned pale. That's not possible. But the scream came again, and this time it called her name, Rochelle. Something scratched from the other side of the wall, like nails on stone. Then, a voice, right behind them. "You shouldn't be here." They spun around. Nothing was there. But the voice lingered in their ears like smoke. The air had turned dense, and the room, different. Time itself felt strange. The clock on the far wall ticked backward. Marcus pointed at it. That wasn't there before. The room seemed to stretch and distort. The beds were gone. Now there were only chairs, rows and rows of them, all facing a single television set in the corner. Rachel stepped forward. The TV turned on by itself. Static. Then, an image appeared. A security feed showing a room just like the one they were in, with them inside it. They watched themselves move, talk, then split up. "What is this?" Claire whispered. "This didn't happen. We never split up." But the screen showed otherwise. In the footage, Rachel went into a hallway alone. Claire walked into a red-lit room. Marcus stood still as a figure approached him from the dark, and then the screen went black. Suddenly, the door to the room opened again. But the hallway outside was no longer the one they came through. It was covered in tiles that pulsed like skin. Rachel held up the map again. The spiral had grown tighter. Ward 9 was pulling them in. Against their better judgment, they stepped into the new hallway. The lights above buzzed like angry insects. Blood-red doors lined each side. Some were cracked open, others bled darkness. Claire stopped at one of the doors. "This is where I went." On the screen. Inside, the walls were lined with mirrors, but none of them showed their reflections. Rachel stepped inside and immediately felt dizzy. Her ears rang. From one of the mirrors, a shadow emerged. It moved like smoke but had eyes. Human eyes. It whispered in a voice that was not its own, but one they recognized. Rachel's grandmother. They thought isolation could cure madness. But the madness made copies. The shadow lunged. Rachel screamed, falling backward into Marcus's arms. Claire turned to run, but the door was gone. They were trapped. The shadow hovered above them, splitting into multiple shapes, each forming faces that looked vaguely like themselves, but wrong. Twisted, smiling too wide, eyes too black. Claire gasped. "It's us." Rachel finally understood. Ward 9 didn't hold patience. It held echoes. Twisted versions of people who entered and never left. The mirrors shattered in unison. The sound was deafening, and yet no shards fell. Instead, each broken mirror became a window into the past. Rachel saw her grandmother, younger, strapped to a gurney in the same hallway they had just left. Doctors circled her, whispering things she couldn't hear. Her grandmother's eyes locked onto Rachel's through time. Claire saw herself as a child, alone in a hospital room, coloring, but something was off. The child turned to look at her with the same twisted smile as the shadow from before. Marcus stood motionless. He saw a boy himself, running down a hallway, chased by orderlies, screaming. The visions vanished, and then the hallway changed again. Now they stood in what looked like an operating theater, rows of seats surrounding a cold metal table. The lights overhead buzzed harshly. On the table, a body. Rachel stepped closer. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Eleanor, but not as she remembered. The body's eyes were sewn shut. Its mouth was agape, frozen mid-scream, and its hands clutched a photo. Rachel picked it up. It was of her. As she looked, the body jerked and whispered, "Don't become me." They ran from the theater, hearts pounding. The map burned hot in Rachel's hands. The spiral had now almost closed. Ward 9 was just a few steps away. The hallway narrowed, lit only by the glowing veins in the walls. A deep hum filled the air, like a giant heartbeat. They reached the final door. It was old, metal, and rusted with black stains. A sign above read, Ward 9 staff only. Marcus hesitated. We don't have to go in. But Rachel stepped forward. It ends here. They pushed the door open. Inside was nothing. A black void stretched out infinitely. No walls, no ceiling, just floating tiles and echoes. Claire whispered, "Is this the center?" From the dark, dozens of figures appeared. Some were patients, others were doctors, and among them reflections of themselves, twisted, hollow, grinning. The door slammed shut behind them, and Ward 9 welcomed them home. They stood in the center of nothingness. The air was thick, like breathing through soaked fabric. Around them, the floating tiles rearranged themselves, forming a crude path spiraling inward. Rachel stepped forward. The map in her hand dissolved into ash. "We've crossed the last line," she whispered. As they walked the spiral, figures began to whisper. Some screamed. Others repeated the same words over and over. "We're still here. We're still here." Claire clutched her ears. "Make it stop." Marcus's flashlight flickered, then died. From the darkness, one of the twisted reflections stepped into view. It looked like Marcus' butt, pale, gaunt, and with black veins crawling across its face. The thing smiled. "I remember dying." Marcus stepped back. "That's not me." The reflection tilted its head. "Then why do I remember your nightmares?" Rachel turned to Claire. Her twin was crying now, mumbling prayers under her breath. More reflections emerged, each more grotesque than the last. A doctor with needles for fingers. A nurse with a sewn-shut mouth. A child that crawled like a spider. The spiral ended at a single door, steel, massive, pulsing like a heartbeat. Etched into it, Eleanor. Rachel reached for it. As Rachel's fingers touched the door, it opened on its own slowly, with a groan like the earth itself crying out. Inside was not a room. It was a memory. They stepped into Eleanor's mind. Hospitals flickered like images in an old film reel, treatment after treatment, voice after voice, all blending into a single scream. In the center stood Eleanor Young, terrified, strapped to a chair with wires in her head. She looked at Rachel. "I didn't forget. I never forgot." The world pulsed. Rachel realized she could feel her grandmother's pain, each shock, each scream, each moment of abandonment. Ward 9 wasn't just a wing. It was a prison of memory. Marcus fell to his knees. Claire began to convulse, her eyes rolling back. Rachel stepped forward. "You brought me here to end this." Eleanor's shadow rose, towering and furious. "Or to take my place." Rachel clenched her fists. "No, I'm not part of this." But the hospital wanted her. Hands grabbed at her ankles, patients, doctors, echoes, all pulling her down. She closed her eyes and screamed. Light burst from within, and then T-lanes. She opened her eyes. Claire was beside her. Marcus, still breathing. The room was empty. The spiral was gone. Only dust remained, and the door was shut forever.